International
Right.
Court of Justice, only the 11th of January, where South Africa took the case of genocide against Israel about what's
It was
going
paid to do that by Iran, of course. Iran used South Africa as the litigant at the International Court against Israel.
Mm-hmm. And Kel fucking surprise, Jeremy Corbin was in attendance amongst.
Oh, of course.
I mean, this ties into what we were saying earlier about the problem with Britain taking how Brits are on the streets. It seems to me there's a whole faction there of people just completely who do not understand the what's going on.
I don't think that is the case with Jeremy Corbyn. He does understand. He's just on the other side. I mean, it's the same with the IRA and Jeremy Corbyn. He did understand. He was just on the other side. He was on the side of Sinn Féin IRA throughout that conflict.
Are you sure? I mean,
if
you were to ask Jeremy Corbyn about Israeli history, I don't think he'd have the slightest clue.
Well,
I mean, I'd love to ask him.
He's, without getting too nasty, I mean, he's a very stupid man. And you can tell the sign of a very stupid man, which is somebody who says the same thing for decades with a slight weariness, as if he has to keep saying it. And if he keeps saying it enough, it's going to happen. You know, these sort of banalities like, you know, that's why we need to fight for justice and peace and that's why we need to tackle all forms of hate, this sort of thing. Now, what does that even mean? No, and by the way, just to go back, that yes, this was a man who just after the IRA tried to kill the elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, invited the leadership of the IRA to the House of Commons. That wasn't because he was a peacemaker. Jeremy Corbyn was nowhere near the peace process. Never, ever been near any peace process. He was not involved in peace in Northern Ireland because nobody would have trusted him to be, because he was so obviously on the side of Sinn Féin IRA throughout. Okay, it's the same with him here. He's on the side of his friends, Hamas and Hezbollah. He is not a peacemaker. Now, there are other people, Islamists on the street. When you say people on the streets of Britain, I really always want to reiterate this point. These are not the British public. They are Islamists, people who take advantage of our country and seem to hate it, and bizarrely enough moved to our country. I can't understand that. Like if I moved to a country, it would generally be because I liked it. But it's people like that. It's a few residual communist types, malcontents and others. The British people can't be like that. They're not like that. And more people went on the Countryside Alliance March in 2000, 2001 than have been on any of these demonstrations in London in recent months. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because a lot of the world sees what's happening in our country of birth, and they say to me, what has happened to Britain? And I have two answers. One is, it is really serious. It is really serious. And secondly, that isn't Britain. That does not speak for Britain. And I think both of those things are worth keeping in mind.
So are you hopeful that Britain can be salvaged? Well,
I think so, but it would require a massive change of tone and a change of leadership. And it's so strange. I mean, British politicians are so odd. And I've watched them all my life. I've known quite a lot from all sides. And many are driven by very good instincts. Many are driven by a genuine sense for public service. But they are also creatures of the wind. You know, they do, for some reason, float where the wind blows them. And the reason I think we've had a generation of pretty supine politicians on this is that they are basically herded like a herd of sheep by very angry sheepdogs who nip at, and sometimes savage people at the side of the herd in order to make the herd behave in a certain way. And we've seen that in recent months as well. You know, people's post bags get filled with complaints from their Muslim constituents and others about Israel, and they start to worry about it. Well, if you ask any MP, by the way, one of the things that they get most in their post bag about foreign policy is Kashmir. Yeah, because there's a lot of people in Britain from the Indian subcontinent who also are very, very exercised about Kashmir.
I've not heard any politician talking about Kashmir.
No. And I've seen no protests on the streets particularly. But you could be fairly certain that if an Indian-Pakistan war, for instance, kicked off at some point, there would be hell on the streets of Britain. Well, I mean, that's just the consequences of mass immigration. If we'd imported millions of people from another part of the world, I mean, this happens. It happened recently in, where was it? In London, with some Eritreans fighting other Eritreans. I mean, I don't see why Eritrean politics should play out in fistfights on the streets of London, but it wasn't my decision to import a lot of Eritreans to London. But as I always say, if you import the world's people, you do import the world's problems.
I'm a bit more pessimistic
Great insight once again from the guru of Great Britain, Douglas Murray. And as he's talking about, he used the analogy of the sheepdogs, basically, nipping and biting and pecking, at the various leadership, both from both parties, whatever. And I liken it to, so each of those sheepdog, one's a transgender sheepdog, one's the gay sheepdog, one's the LGBTQIA MOUSE sheepdog, one's a racism sheepdog, one's a bigotry sheepdog, Hamas sheepdog, Palestinian sheepdog, Israelis. I mean, they're all nipping at the heels, politicians trying to herd them in a certain way. And then social media, well, that's its own little sheepdog, right? Where you think that there's a huge contingency of people that are behind a certain movement, usually from the left side, the progressive side, and all the handlers are telling the people in power, the congressmen, the senators, and everything, sir, ma'am, there's a lot of noise out there. Okay, we need to listen to it. We need to maybe pivot, maneuver, do what we need to do to be on top of this thing, because it could mean votes or loss of votes. Let's, get the calculus out there and decide, which way we're going to do. Just like he said, the proverbial wind. Which way is it blowing now? And you don't usually have politicians that will come out and make a stance or a stand for the good of the country, even though the majority of the population are basically being, told that the stance that the politicians have or the country has is wrong. That's what makes Donald Trump so different, because he basically gives the double middle finger when if it's meaning that the country has got to survive and it's good for the citizens, and doesn't usually, play that cowering game where you're cowering towards the tyranny of the minority. That's not what happens. And then finally, as Douglas Murray so aptly put, you import that many people that quickly who are completely different in terms of the values and the way that they were raised in the societies that they were in. And now you bring them over to a completely brand new land, new language, new customs, new rules, new everything. You bring it over that fast? Well, guess what, folks? You're going to bring over the problems from that part of the country as well. In every aspect of that society, wherever those problems were, social, political, religious, family, lifestyle, culture, whatever the problems were, you're going to import those as well. That's what we have on tap for you today, folks. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what happens when you get Douglas Murray, you sit him down in an interview, and you talk to him about Hamas, Israel, Palestine, social media, culture, religion, politics. You bring it all together. Let's get back to the interview right now.
7 might be just another, to use your language, moment where Britain and Europe continues on its strange death.
Yes.
It's just like add it to the list of the Manchester attacks, London Bridge attacks, Lee Rigby, Reading attacks in 2020, so David Amos.
Yes.
Hartlepool, there was a asylum seeker killed a man, a pensioner in Hartlepool.
That was disappeared as a story.
Yeah, that's completely
fast.
gone.
Yeah.
And it's just another case that we're going to just ignore and kind of continue in our merry way.
I think there's a reason for that, which is the question a politician would ask, has asked me, has said to me in private about that is, well, what would you do about it? Right. What would you do about it? Now, that's a pretty big question to have to answer. One answer I give when people say that is, well, I didn't create this problem. And again, you created a problem and you're telling other people to solve it. Or you're saying it's insoluble, or let's pretend it didn't happen. I mean, I was very struck by, I think
So
you went to the
true,
Cyclone
so true.
Festival, didn't you? I was very struck by the fact that I've spoken to a lot of survivors of the Nova Festival and the families of people who were killed there. And it haunts, of all of the atrocities of October 7th, it's one of the ones that haunts me most, because I sort of think, I know a lot of people who could have been there. Not just Israelis, but an international circuit party. I know a lot of people who go to those, and like the ones at the Nova Festival were just incredibly unlucky that they met Hamas that morning. But sometimes people here in Israel have said to me in recent months, you know, what would you do if that happened in your country? And I say it did happen in my country. Happened at Manchester Arena. But what was the British response to it? Much to my fury, what was the British response to it? It was, don't look back in anger. And as I've said many times, I don't see why you shouldn't look back in anger if 22 young girls are blown up by a suicide bomber who'd come with his family from Libya because they'd fallen out with Gaddafi. I don't think that my country should be the retirement home for jihadists who've rowed with Colonel Gaddafi. I think sort it out amongst yourselves. But, you know, we imported that family, and then their son detonated a suicide bombing at an Ariana Grande concert. And yeah, the British response was, don't look back in anger. But why was that the response is a really interesting question. And I think the answer is because, again, the question is, what are we going to do about it? I was asked
Don't be racist. That's the
very
that's
senior figure in the military, in the media. In that period, because I was furious about the way in which the media was reporting it as well. And this person said, you know, we're missing the public, aren't we? We're missing the mood. What do we do? And I said, yes, you're missing the mood, because you've gone straight on to the kind of one love. Well, that only works if you've dealt with your enemy. And we in Britain just sort of, you know, the inquiry into the Manchester Arena attack discovered that a security guard who saw the bomber thought he was suspicious, saw him acting suspiciously. He was carrying a large rucksack with what turned out to be a large explosive in it. And the reason the security guard didn't report the young man was because he looked Muslim, and the guard worried he'd be accused of racism or Islamophobia. When people say, why do you care about these things? I say, because it actually kills.
Yeah.
Okay? This so-called political correctness and things, it actually kills.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's the thing. Everybody talks about see something, do something. People, you've got to be able, I don't give a damn what it is. If it's a guy that's brown skin and with a beard, or the white skin with a beard, or it doesn't freaking matter what they look like. And even if they do look like somebody from Asia, or they do look like a Pakistani or an Indian or whatever the hell it is, Asian, Chinese, whatever, and they look suspicious, they're acting suspicious, something inside of you is, you know, your spider sense is freaking tingling. At least make the concerted effort. There's nothing that's going to happen if you go over and just say, hi, hello, how's everything going? You know, hey, we just have to check something out. Do you mind? You might save a life or lives if you just, you know, stand up with freaking conviction and do your freaking job when you're supposed to do it. That's what we're missing. Missing people doing their goddamn job.
Not a harmless pursuit. If there was a more appropriate attitude towards all of these things, a more realistic attitude towards these things in Britain, in America, in every other Western country, there would be people alive today who are not.
Absolutely, so true.
3 of those people are Lucy Lowe, Becky Watson, and Laura Wilson, who were all killed by grooming gangs. They should be household names. Everyone should know their names. George Floyd is a household name.
Mm-hmm.
These 3 white British girls who were killed because they were white by the grooming gangs, I even have to look them up.
Right. And the media doesn't. The media does very, very little actually in reporting on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a friend of mine a few years ago started doing a book on the so-called grooming gangs the rape gangs in Britain, and he actually didn't get around to writing it. He said it was just the whole thing was too depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing he did say to me, which I was very struck by, was he said he thought when he went around interviewing the victims, the thousands of.
Well, folks, thanks for taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already and you like our content, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow it. You know what to do, obviously. Take a look at our other video links above and below. Love to hear your comments, thoughts as well. Put those down there too. Let's see what you're thinking. My final thought as always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.